There is a video clip we still play sometimes, though none of us can get through it without stopping. It is shaky and grainy, filmed from a porch on a late summer afternoon. You can hear birds and the buzz of insects. Then, a burst of laughter. 3 children are trying to build a tent in the backyard. Jared is waving a stick like a sword. Amelia is already frustrated, trying to read the instructions. Theo is on the ground with a tent pole across his lap, saying softly, "This isn't going to work." You cannot see their faces clearly, but you can hear it. That rhythm, that shared breath, the way their voices braid together as if they were one person speaking through 3 mouths. They were the kind of children people remember without effort. Jared, Amelia, and Theo Rowe. Triplets born in the early hours of September 12, 1994, in a delivery room crowded with nurses and nervous laughter. Jared came first, loud and red-faced. Amelia followed, tiny and blinking. Then Theo, silent at first, until Jared cried again, and he joined in. From that moment forward, they moved as a unit. In strollers, in car seats, in the bathtub, even in punishment. If one of them got grounded, they all stayed home. Not out of obligation, but something deeper. Something that lived in the space between their glances and silences. They grew up in a modest house on Sandalwood Drive in Winona, Minnesota, a green bungalow with chipped paint and a yard big enough for 3 bikes. Their mother, Denise, worked at the county records office. Their father, Anthony, left when they were still toddlers, but the triplets visited him every other weekend in Red Wing. He called them "my satellite kids" because they were always orbiting each other, never quite alone. By the time they were 8, they each had their own favorite color. Jared liked orange. Amelia liked teal. Theo said he liked the color of sky when it is about to rain. They were in the same class at Pleasant Valley Elementary, but insisted on sitting at different tables so they could have stories to tell each other at lunch. They had their own jokes, their own rules, their own quiet. They did not talk over each other. They waited. If Jared scraped his knee, Amelia brought a bandage, and Theo sat next to him, saying nothing until he felt better. Amelia wrote stories. Jared caught frogs. Theo listened. There is a drawing that still hangs on their mother's refrigerator, curling at the edges now. It shows 3 stick figures under a sun the size of a beach ball. The grass is green, the sky is blue, and all 3 figures are smiling, their hands locked together. Above them, in large looping letters, "We stay together." Their 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Mathis, later said, "It was like they breathed in sync. If one turned their head, the others followed. They didn't compete. They waited for each other." The last family photo was taken in late June of 2003. They are at the county fair, holding matching snow cones. Jared has blue on his nose. Amelia is squinting into the sun. Theo is smiling with only half his mouth. You can see Denise in the background, leaning toward them, trying to get them to look at the camera. She never did get a second photo. Something about the light changed, and then the kids ran off toward the carousel. 3 children, 8 years old, smart, ordinary, loved. Their names stitched into backpacks. Their toothbrushes lined up on the bathroom sink. Their voices echoing in a house that has not been truly quiet since. And then they were gone. It was a Sunday afternoon, July 6th, 2003. Denise remembers the smell of cut grass, something faintly burnt from a neighbor's grill, and the kind of humid air that made everything feel slow and close to still. The triplets were playing in the backyard, like they always did. Jared had turned the clothesline pole into a makeshift maypole. Amelia was reading, lying flat on the grass in a patch of shade. Theo was bouncing a tennis ball off the side of the garage, counting in whispers. Denise was inside, folding laundry. The sliding door was cracked open so she could hear them. She says she had a clear line of sight, up until the call came from her sister. It was nothing urgent, just a quick question about something their uncle had said. She went into the kitchen to hear better. She was gone for maybe 4 minutes, 5 at most. When she returned, the yard was empty. Not unusual at first. The triplets had a habit of drifting together toward the fence or disappearing to the neighbor's house without asking. Denise called out once, then again. She checked the side gate and saw it swinging slightly, slow, deliberate, not the way it moved in wind. The latch was unhooked. She circled the yard. The swing was still in motion. The book Amelia had been reading was face down in the grass. The tennis ball had rolled under the porch steps. The peanut butter jar used for collecting bugs was on its side by the porch. She walked to the front of the house, thinking maybe they had wandered out toward the mailbox or across the street. No sign of them. Not on the sidewalk. Not in the cul-de-sac. The Rowes lived on a street that looped like a question mark. You could see from one end to the other without much effort. And Denise could see, with rising panic, that there was no one there. She called their names louder, then louder still. Then she checked the garage, the attic, the bathroom. She ran up the stairs, calling until her voice cracked. Their shoes were still lined up by the door, their backpacks untouched, all 3 beds unmade, still rumpled from that morning. At 2:55 p.m., she called her sister again, then the police. Officer Dean Meckler arrived just after 3:10. He later wrote in his report that the mother was alert but clearly distressed, repeating that her children never wandered. The initial report was filed as a suspected runaway, multiple minors, no visible signs of foul play. Neighbors came forward almost immediately. Cheryl Marks, retired librarian, said she saw the triplets around 2:15, walking along the edge of the yard, like they were following something. She said they weren't holding hands, which struck her as odd. They always held hands. Then there was Leo Kim, 14, who told police he saw a silver sedan parked across the street around the same time. It was idling, windows rolled up, no plates. He said he glanced at it twice and felt like the person inside was watching him, but he could not see their face. He had seen it before, once or twice in the past few weeks, always during the day, always facing the same direction. Police took his statement, thanked him, but nothing came of it. The car was never found. By evening, a search perimeter had been established. A K-9 unit was called in from Rochester. Volunteers walked the woods behind the neighborhood, forming uneven lines, calling names into trees that gave nothing back. No blood, no footprints, no fibers, nothing broken, nothing scattered, nothing that told a story. By midnight, Denise was still on the porch. She had not sat down. The porch light stayed on. It would remain on, without interruption, for 12 nights. Even after the volunteers had gone home, even after the press stopped calling, even after her voice had gone hoarse from repeating the same 3 names to anyone who would listen. She told police, "I keep thinking I heard them, just past the fence, like they were calling me, but soft, like they didn't want to wake me up." And still, nothing came. In the first week, the neighborhood became unrecognizable. Yellow tape crisscrossed driveways. Uniformed officers lingered on porches. Vans from Minneapolis news stations parked crooked in the cul-de-sac, antennas stretching into the sky. Helicopters thumped above the trees. The search moved from the woods to the riverbanks to empty buildings downtown. Volunteers brought maps and granola bars, filled Denise's kitchen without asking. Some stayed until the sun went down. Others never came back after that first Sunday. The official search lasted 26 days. They brought in dogs trained to detect clothing scent and cadaver trace. Divers went into the river in early August, sweeping slow circles through muddy, silty water. A psychic wrote 3 letters to the sheriff's office and left voicemails that were never returned. The FBI entered the case in the 3rd week, though only in an advisory capacity. Their files were eventually sealed. No persons of interest were named. No suspects were detained. No evidence was ever recovered. After a month, the press stopped coming. The porch light stayed on. At first, Denise kept the triplets' beds as they were, 3 piles of sheets, 1 plush animal each: Theo's bear, Amelia's owl, Jared's frog. In late August, she washed their clothes and folded them carefully, thinking they might need them ready. She packed 3 backpacks for the first day of 4th grade. Then she unpacked them. In October, Anthony moved to Chicago. He told reporters he needed air, though some said he had started drinking more in those months. He gave a tearful interview outside the courthouse when the case was officially reclassified as an abduction. After that, he stopped speaking publicly. He sent birthday cards to his own P.O. box for 7 years straight, each addressed to a different city. The Rowe home slowly turned in on itself. Denise stopped opening the blinds. She didn't mow the yard that summer. A neighbor eventually did it for her, without asking. The tire swing came down in a storm and was never replaced. The bookshelves stayed dusty. She left the answering machine full, afraid of deleting a message that might mean something. She stopped going to work in early September. Her sister moved in by Thanksgiving. The town changed, too. Parents started walking their kids home from school again. Doors that used to stay unlocked got deadbolts. 2 families on Sandalwood Drive moved out. Nobody said it directly, but everyone knew why. And still, the car was never found. There were reports, scattered and inconsistent, for years afterward. A woman in South Dakota said she saw 3 children in a gas station bathroom, barefoot and dazed. She reported it to local police but couldn't give details. In 2007, a caller from Wisconsin claimed to have seen a boy resembling Jared at a roadside diner, quiet, sitting beside a man who never removed his sunglasses. The lead went cold within days. Nothing held. Every trail vanished before it began. In 2010, the case was formally declared inactive. The file was boxed and moved to storage. Denise requested copies of the final pages. She kept them in a drawer next to the batteries and old birthday candles. One by one, the neighbors stopped mentioning it. People wanted to be kind, but they also wanted it to be over, as if silence could erase what the wind had once carried through their windows. One day in 2011, Denise gave an interview. Her voice was thin, calm, almost practiced. I still set out 4 plates. I don't know why. Habit, I guess. Maybe hope. The interviewer asked if she believed they were still alive. She didn't answer. In October of 2018, a woman named Lacey Hendrick purchased a foreclosed home in La Crosse, Wisconsin, about 40 miles east of Winona. It was a 1-story house near the river, with peeling shutters and a garage that had been padlocked shut from the inside. She was newly divorced, working 2 jobs, and had picked the house for its price, not its charm. She began renovations that same month. The kitchen tiles came up easily. The hallway had water damage. The garage, however, felt different. There was a smell she could not name, not foul, just old, like paper that had been closed too long. One morning, while pulling down a set of warped shelves on the far wall, she noticed something strange. Behind the back panel, there was space. A hollow cavity about the size of a small closet. Inside, covered in dust and fiberglass insulation, was a cardboard box. On the top, written in permanent marker, were the words, "Don't open." She called the police that afternoon, not because of the message, but because of what she saw inside. There were 3 disposable cameras, corroded around the battery hinges, A child's sock, rolled clean, with a faded tag that read AR, and a brown paper lunch bag, dry and intact, with 3 names written on it in shaky blue ink: Jared, Amelia, Theo. The box also contained a broken watch, a school flyer for a 2003 field day event, and what looked like a child's drawing of a car with no wheels. No photos, no tapes, no documents. At least, not until the cameras were developed. A forensic imaging team in Minneapolis managed to retrieve 37 partial exposures. Most were dark, some completely fogged, but a dozen came out clear enough to identify the subjects. They showed 3 children, barefoot in matching pajamas, seated in what appeared to be a wood-paneled room with no visible windows. They were pale but not injured. Still, posed. In one image, Jared is holding a small, plush frog. In another, Amelia is standing beside a wall where tally marks have been etched into the paneling. Theo appears in every frame, eyes slightly unfocused. But it was the last photo that changed everything. It was taken through blinds. The angle suggests the person holding the camera was inside the room, pointing outward. In the blurry middle ground, barely distinguishable through the slats, sits a silver sedan, parked on a patch of gravel. The car has no license plate. It is facing the woods. No figures are visible in or around it. The timestamp on the camera indicates the photo was taken in mid-July 2003, roughly a week after the Rowe triplets disappeared. The house where the box was found had been owned by a man named Walter Keene, a custodian who died in 2009. He had no known criminal record, no known family. He had never lived in Winona. Neighbors described him as quiet, withdrawn, rarely seen. Police searched every inch of the house. Cadaver dogs were brought in. The floorboards beneath the garage were pulled up. A partial fingerprint was recovered from the inside of the box, but it matched no one in the national database. The cameras were traced to a bulk order sold in Rochester in early 2003. No names were attached to the sale. The silver sedan in the photo was tentatively identified by an analyst as a 1999 Honda Accord. Gray or silver. No distinct markings. No other evidence was recovered. And yet, the discovery set everything in motion again. The Winona Police Department officially reopened the Rowe file on November 2, 2018. The box was entered into evidence. A press conference was held. Denise was not in attendance. She declined interviews. Her sister read a brief statement. "We are grateful for the renewed attention. We are hoping for truth. But we are not hoping for a miracle." The box was eventually shown to her in private. She recognized the sock. She recognized the lunch bag. But it was the drawing of the car that broke her. She said it looked exactly like one Jared had drawn months before they disappeared, down to the single door and missing wheels. "They used to make up stories," she said, quiet, "about vehicles that could move without tires, that floated, that whispered when they stopped." She did not elaborate. The Winona Police Department reopened the Rowe file with caution. Officially, the case had never been closed, only moved to inactive status. Unofficially, it had been untouched for nearly a decade. The box found in La Crosse changed that. Suddenly, detectives who had retired were being called back. New personnel were assigned. Case notes once stored on microfilm were digitized. Dust was replaced with urgency. Detective Laura Benning, who had joined the force in 2005 and was only distantly familiar with the case, was placed at the helm of the renewed investigation. She later said, "We were looking at this like a room frozen in time. Every item had meaning, but none of it made sense without context." She spent 3 weeks reviewing the original witness statements, scene photos, school records, even birthday invitations. Most of the neighbors had moved away. Many of the officers involved in the original search had since passed on or refused to revisit it. One early challenge was the camera film itself. Experts confirmed the photos were authentic and had not been altered, but they could not determine who had taken them. There were no selfies, no reflections, no shadows indicating another person. Only the children, sitting or standing in various positions, their eyes often unfocused, their mouths closed. There were no signs of distress in the expressions, but something in their stillness suggested a kind of rehearsed quiet, a performance of calm, or perhaps exhaustion. FBI analysts were consulted. They ran the fingerprints again. The partial print from the box matched no one in the system. A forensic linguist was brought in to analyze the handwritten names on the lunch bag. Her report suggested the writing belonged to a child, possibly Amelia, based on letter formation, consistent with known schoolwork. This detail was later disputed by a second analyst, who argued the spacing and pressure indicated an adult hand mimicking a child's. The sedan in the final photo became the central focus. Analysts enhanced the image using deep learning techniques. They confirmed it was most likely a late 1990s Honda Accord, light metallic in color, no front plate. One small distinguishing feature: the rear passenger window was covered by what looked like newspaper or cardboard from the inside. They canvassed DMV records from 2002 to 2004, looking for owners of similar vehicles in southeastern Minnesota and western Wisconsin. Thousands of entries, none traceable to Keene or any known associate. Surveillance footage from nearby gas stations and convenience stores had long since been erased. There were no traffic cam databases in place at the time, no toll booths on the rural routes. They hit another dead end. Then came the report from a woman in Vernon County, Wisconsin, who had seen the reopened case on television. She contacted the Winona tip line to say she remembered the house in La Crosse. She had visited it once, briefly, in 2004, with a friend who was buying second-hand tools from a man with a limp and long white hair. She said there was something strange about the garage, that it had a thick metal door inside the wooden one, and that she heard children's voices, very faint, while waiting in the car. Her story was vague, the date unverifiable, the friend unreachable, but it unsettled the room. Keene's past was re-examined. He had worked night shifts for over 20 years as a hospital janitor. He was never married, had no criminal history, and lived alone. But two names appeared more than once in his personnel file: complaints from coworkers about inappropriate behavior around pediatric patients. No formal actions were taken. The notes simply read, "Spoken to, matter resolved." When Denise was told of these details, she asked no questions. She only requested that the photos be returned to her if and when the case closed. There was no arrest, no charges, no resolution. But for the first time in 15 years, something tangible had surfaced, something real, something that had once been in a hidden room, in a hidden wall, in a forgotten house. Detective Benning said quietly in her final report, "Someone built that space, someone labeled that box, someone placed those children in that room. That means someone still knows why." For a long time, Denise Rowe didn't call it grief. She called it waiting. She said that grief was something final, like a door that shut and stayed shut. But what she had felt, day after day for years, was more like standing at that door and knocking, hoping, listening, sometimes hearing something, even if it was nothing. In the years after the investigation went cold, Denise's life narrowed into patterns. She woke at 6:30 every morning, the way she had when the triplets were in school. She made breakfast for 4 and threw away most of it by 8. She bought 3 pairs of shoes every September. She kept up with the school calendar long after they would have graduated. On what would have been their senior year, She bought a yearbook anonymously and flipped through every page, wondering who their friends would have been. Some neighbors thought she had lost her mind. Others thought she was brave. She didn't argue with either. She never left the house for long, never stayed away overnight. She didn't go on vacations, even when her sister offered. The farthest she ever traveled was to a missing persons vigil in St. Paul in 2011. She held a photo and stood between two mothers she didn't know, each holding a candle like it was a fragile animal. When the lacrosse discovery happened in 2018, reporters returned to her doorstep. They waited in their vans across the street, camera lenses resting just above the dashboard. She never came out, never answered the door. Her sister Ellen was the one who stepped forward. Ellen Rowe had always been practical. She was a nurse, a record keeper, someone who trusted systems, until this case. After 2018, she began a quiet but determined campaign. She filed requests with the State Crime Bureau for cold case funding records. She met with forensic experts to understand how long fingerprints can survive in a sealed space. She wrote to every elected official in the Tri-County area asking what they were doing for families like hers. In her testimony before the State Committee on Digital Evidence Protocols, she said, "We're not angry at law enforcement. We're tired. We're tired of being the ones who have to chase the paper trail, of explaining to new detectives why our children's names matter." That same year, Ellen founded the Row 3 Project, a nonprofit aimed at supporting families of long-term missing children. It offered small grants for things police no longer covered: private lab testing, age progression imaging, even emotional support therapy. She didn't have the money, but she found people who did. A retired judge donated office space. A local tech company donated server hosting. The first year, they helped 12 families. By the third year, over 50. Denise remained in the background. But every December, she wrote a letter for the newsletter. Never dramatic, just a few paragraphs. She often ended them the same way: "If you are still looking, I am too." Her house changed only in small ways. The porch light, once kept on year-round, burned out and was never replaced. The tire swing, once knotted to the maple, was removed in 2016 after a storm brought the tree down. She boxed up the triplets' shoes, but never gave them away. She told her sister she couldn't bear the idea of another child walking in them. She kept one room untouched, their bedroom. The beds had new sheets now, changed once a year. The drawings remained taped to the walls, curling slightly at the edges. A mobile of stars and planets still hung over the middle bed. A calendar on the desk was still turned to July 2003. Anthony Rowe returned to the picture briefly. After hearing about the discovery in La Crosse, he traveled from Chicago to attend a missing and exploited children conference. He sat in the back of the room during the keynote speech and wore a pin with all 3 names. A journalist recognized him and approached gently. He said very little, just that he still dreamed of them sometimes. "In the dream, I'm at a gas station. They're in the back seat, fast asleep. I don't turn around. I just keep driving. I don't know where we're going, but I don't stop." He left before the second day of the conference. His hotel room was found empty, untouched, except for a folded flyer about the Rowe case placed on the desk. He has not spoken publicly since. Denise, in her own way, kept searching, but it was a quiet kind of searching. She still looked at the faces of children and passing cars, still paused at the sound of voices in parking lots. She didn't keep a private investigator or post on forums, but she remembered everything. The height of Jared's voice when he got excited, the way Amelia tugged at her sleeves when she was nervous, the small mole behind Theo's left ear. Details she would carry until they faded, and she feared that more than anything. In a rare moment of disclosure, Denise once spoke to Detective Benning, off the record. The conversation was brief, almost impersonal. But near the end, she said something that would stay with the detective long after the case faded again. If they were alive long enough to take those pictures, does that mean they knew they weren't coming home? Benning had no answer. Neither did anyone else. It is strange how grief reshapes time. For Denise Rowe, the last confirmed moment of her children's lives sits in her memory like a photograph that never fades. July 6, 2003, sometime between the laundry and the phone call. That is where her memory stops being chronological. Everything after that moment is emotional. Impressions, sensations. She says she doesn't remember what she had for dinner that night, but she remembers the sound the swing made, the creaking, lazy half-loop it made when no one was on it. Time doesn't move forward after something like this. It circles, comes back around, rewinds. You find yourself remembering a smell from a winter morning, and suddenly you're on your knees, crying in the produce aisle. You hear children's voices outside your window, and your heart sprints without permission. You go years without seeing their faces in your dreams. And then, one night, all three are sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for breakfast like nothing happened. That is what Denise lives with. Not just the pain, but the re-entry. The way absence reintroduces itself in daily life. Softly, cruelly, without warning. After the investigation reopened, she did not seek attention. She didn't do interviews. She didn't host fundraisers or hold vigils. She didn't go on television, didn't join message boards, didn't sit across from psychologists eager to interpret what survival looks like. She let her sister carry that weight. Ellen was better with people, better with answers. Denise was better with memory. She still lives on Sandalwood Drive. The same green house, the same chipped paint. The wind chimes are gone now, and the maple tree in the backyard is just a stump. But the interior hasn't changed much. The kitchen still holds drawings taped to the fridge, browned at the edges. The hallway still has 3 coat hooks, labeled with faded masking tape, J, A, T. Their bedroom has become more of a shrine than a space. Denise cleans it, not obsessively, but faithfully. She opens the windows on warm days. She washes the sheets once a year. She doesn't speak to the room, but she moves through it gently, like someone entering a hospital ward. There's a sense that something sacred was paused there, not ended. She has said as much, when asked. I don't feel like they're gone. I feel like they're on the other side of a wall I can't see. Each year on their birthday, she bakes a cake. 3 candles, 1 color for each child. She does not eat it. She leaves it on the table overnight and throws it away in the morning. She says it's not about hope. It's about keeping time. Other people remember them differently. Former classmates, now in their 20s, have said they still think about the triplets when they hear certain songs or see old class photos. One girl, now a mother herself, said she named her daughter Amelia because the name never left her. Detective Benning, who carried the reopened case further than anyone before her, has since moved on to another department. She says she still keeps a photo of the triplets in her drawer, not to investigate, just to remember. She said once in an interview, "You can't work a case like that and not come away changed. You start asking yourself what your memory is worth, what your silence might cost." The Row 3 project has grown slowly but steadily. It now funds re-examinations of missing persons cases across 4 states. Its volunteers include retired analysts, grief counselors, and data engineers. They meet quarterly in a borrowed church basement in Winona. They end every meeting by reading names aloud, one by one. Jared, Amelia, Theo. The names never change. In La Crosse, the house where the box was found has since been torn down. The lot sat vacant for 2 years, then was repurposed into a small park with no signage, just grass and one wooden bench. The city didn't hold a dedication. Some say it was an intentional silence, a space without a plaque, a kind of apology that didn't need to be named. And still, there is no closure. The silver sedan was never identified. The person who built the hidden room was never found. The photos offer only more questions. The sock, the lunch bag, the drawings, none of it explains the why. None of it answers the single question that haunts everyone involved. How does something so complete, 3 voices, 3 lives, a whole childhood, simply disappear? How does it vanish in daylight? And how does it stay gone? Sometimes, late at night, Denise still hears the back gate creak in the wind. She tells herself it is nothing, just weather, just memory. But she walks to the window anyway, and she waits. The cameras found in that box showed 3 children in a room no one can locate. They looked fed. They looked unharmed. They looked still. But there was something missing in their eyes, something dimmed, a kind of quiet that no child should know. We do not know who took those photographs. We do not know how long the triplets were in that house, or where they went afterward, or if they ever truly left. We do not know who drove that car, and we do not know why someone would go to such great lengths to hide something only to leave behind a box that would eventually be found. But someone knows. Someone walked into that garage, sealed up that space, wrote those names, packed that bag, clicked that shutter, and someone has stayed quiet ever since. So we ask you now, the same question that has echoed through this case for over 2 decades. If those children were alive long enough to be photographed, to be dressed and positioned and held still, then what happened after the last photo was taken? And why has no one spoken since?